Welcome to the Nonprofit SideKick podcast. Changing the world is hard work, and nonprofit leaders are wearing all the hats while herding all of the cats, and it can get really lonely. You could use a sidekick.
We think of ourselves as your partners in mastering the unique balancing act of nonprofit leadership. Our goal is to provide insights, coaching, and direction for nonprofit leaders, both the heart and soul of nonprofit leadership and the nuts and bolts of nonprofit management. We're your hosts, Wendy Bertner
and Stephanie Masters.
Today, we're going to talk about thought leadership in the nonprofit sector. I think this is something that people who move into leadership either really get it and they naturally get it and they do it, or they just don't even think about it. And even in some cases, they just don't want to do it. So let's start with defining what we mean by thought leadership. We're talking about your organization has a mission. People are looking to your organization to be kind of experts or subject matter experts. So how do you put yourself out there as a thought leader in your field, as a subject matter expert? And as I mentioned, some executive directors come into the role and really don't want the spotlight. Some don't understand that that's part of the role. And some just kind of naturally are like, they just naturally do it. They know how to do it. So let's talk about how to grow into that, because the ones that naturally know how to do it probably aren't going to listen to this episode anyway. So there's an awareness for executive directors, I think, in that middle category that, you know, they might see others writing letters to the editor, doing a podcast or doing a blog or something like that. But they might not feel comfortable doing that. So we want to encourage you to think about little bites, little pieces of information. How can you take little pieces of your subject matter and put them out there? As I said, podcast or blog, letter to the editor, responding to something publicly are all good ways to do it. But that might be how you start, but you should really end up with a plan for thought leadership, a plan for how am I going to position myself as a thought leader in this area.
I've watched you talk about this in our Impact program, which is our executive leadership program. Why is it important for leaders in the nonprofit sector to even consider being a thought leader?
Well, the first reason is fundraising. You know, if you want to be successful in fundraising, people have to know about your organization. They have to trust your organization. They have to understand that you know what you're doing and feel good about it. So that's the number one reason for the organization. Secondly, you know, and maybe more selfishly, it's for you as a person, your career, your development. And then third, it's to network, to meet other people, because once you are out there, other people are going to come in and say, hey, me too, or I want to learn from you. Or, you know, like they're just going to come up and want to be part of your network more than if you sit there quietly.
I've watched you build this thought leadership culture within the executive director huddles. Mm-hmm. So it's a safe space for leaders who do join the huddle to share best practices, talk about trends, things that they're looking at and considering. And when other people have an opportunity to ask questions and share, I think everybody walks away with more information. It's more collaborative. It gets people to look at things from different perspectives.
Yeah. And the executive director huddles are once a month on Zoom for an hour, and there's no agenda. There's, you know, we just kind of get together and talk. And sometimes it's people asking, what software are you using for donor management? And other times it's people networking saying, oh, hey, I never knew your organization existed, right? And that's where I try to encourage people, talk more about what you do, what your organization does, but also what you do and what you know. For some people, it's easier to position the organization as the thought leader. So they talk a lot about that. But it can be an uphill battle. You know, a lot of people get into this work because they're very passionate about a specific issue, mm-hmm. and they want to help people. Particularly founders, but not only founders, will kind of leave some of this behind and they don't view it as important because they think, well, I've got to work with these kids today. I don't have time to write that blog post because working with the kids is more important. And that's more of our mission. But if you look at it as kind of the ROI, like you're going to sit down and write a blog post, but that's going to go out. People are going to see it. You're going to build more relationships and network more. Then maybe that'll help you think of it differently in your head too.
What I loved about our conversation with executive leaders around this is that one of the first pieces of a thought leader is really honing in on what is your leadership brand. Mm-hmm. Who are you? Who are you in the sector? Who are you to the organization? And that's where we've leveraged the Clifton Strengths Assessment to have people read through the report and understand, okay, this is how I build relationships and this is how I can talk about these things. And I think it really helps hone in on what is that concise messaging. What do I want to say? Why do I want to say it? What's the impact that I'm looking for?
And how? Mm-hmm. For some people, doing a podcast might be really great for them. For some people, writing a blog might be really great for them. Some people, it might be, speaking at conferences, getting up in front of as many people as possible. And I can almost hear our listeners cringing at that last one because I know so many of them, like, that's not what they want to do. But I, encouraging finding the right way to position yourself as a thought leader. It might not be being a keynote speaker at nonprofit conferences across the country. Maybe it is, but figuring that out, you can start with your strengths. Who am I? What are my strengths? But then, how can I kind of intentionally build this thought leadership persona?
And you talked about the power of being a thought leader and building your network. Mm-hmm. And the first book club that we ever did was Impact Networks. And it's how do you bring individuals who are doing similar or same work or complementary work and utilizing the thought leadership in each space to build something bigger, better, to have broader impact on people, community, environment, whatever it might be. And I really feel like this thought leadership piece is a critical lens in which we need to think about how we're going to build those impact networks, especially in our region.
Yeah. So I want to underscore that when we're talking about thought leadership, it's not necessarily ego driven. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily, I want to be in the spotlight and only me in the spotlight, particularly in the nonprofit sector. We're just talking about being recognized as somebody who knows their stuff and somebody that maybe the newspaper might call when they have an article about, whatever your mission area is. If you come into this with a huge ego, then you won't be able to build those impact networks that are so important in so many places in the nonprofit sector. We'd also talk about the sector being a place where you have to be competitive and collaborative as a leader because you do have to compete with other nonprofits. I'm not saying you don't. Yes, there are grants out there. You're going to be competing for attention and what have you. But I've always found that positioning yourself as a thought leader that is also collaborative and open to working with others and networking with others and respecting that others approach the same problem in a different way, that only makes it better for everybody, including the funders. That's what they want to see. They don't want to see fake collaborations. They want to see a bunch of thought leaders coming together, putting their heads together and coming up with innovative ways to address that problem. That's what they're talking about. They're not talking about, I'm going to give you a grant of $50,000 and each of you get 10 to go do your own thing. They really want to see thought leaders coming together. But if you're not seen as a thought leader, if you don't see yourself as a thought leader, that's not going to come together.
How do people get started in looking at building, what is my brand as a thought leader?
I think it's that. That's how they get started. Yeah. That's how they start.
Ask the question.
Right. Yeah. Ask yourself that question. If you haven't ever thought of yourself as a thought leader before, think about that. I'll tell my story about myself. I have been a leader in many different kinds of nonprofits. Health and Human Services, advocacy, an arts organization. I ran a corporate foundation, kind of a generalist. And sometime within the last 10 years, it hit me that where I should be focusing my thought leadership time and energy on is, positioning myself as knowledgeable of nonprofit management. So So I can talk to you about breast cancer. I ran a breast cancer organization for a long time. I can talk to you about film. I ran a film arts organization. But what I really want to talk to you about is that. So I had to kind of think about what is my own thought leadership. Now, while I was at that film organization, I knew nothing about film. I came in to, administratively kind of help them get into shape, ended up leading the organization and really having to learn about film. And I think, again, I'm going to bring ego into it. I also had to learn when I needed to step back and let somebody who is more knowledgeable take over and say those, be the front person for that and really share that limelight. So yes, it's figuring out what are you thought leaders of, what topic, whatever it is, what are your kind of points that you want to make? How do you want to insert yourself? What mechanisms do you want to use? Do you want to use a blog, a podcast? Do you just want to show up places? Do you want to start applying to different conferences to be speakers or workshop leaders? There's lots of different ways that you can kind of introduce yourself. And I think, you have to kind of keep at it a little bit, but then people will start asking you because you'll be recognized as a thought leader.
Absolutely. And I also see so many of the leaders that we work with that do so much research, so much reading. They seek out partnerships of specialists and experts in particular areas.
Yep.
And we always encourage people to build their networks, the most important networks that they need, which are the personal, operational, and strategic. And that you need these different people in your life to enhance what you're doing now and help you plan for the future. So how do you continue to grow and develop as a thought leader?
Yeah.
Because I think it's always evolving. You can't just say
Absolutely.
I'm an expert on this now and forever.
Yes. Yeah. And being a thought leader is a little different from just being an expert. It's not just regurgitating statistics. Absolutely, you need to constantly be reading, keeping up with whatever it is, whatever your subject matter is, what's going on. But it's also understanding that and applying that and being able to be conversational. When I started, there were a lot of statistics that I needed to learn. And it was I could just rattle off statistics that made my point, whatever that point was, But as you evolve into it, then suddenly you're you understand the why behind those statistics, or you understand where is that taking us? What kind of trend is happening? You become a little more analytical about it. And that's when you really start to feel it. And you're okay, all right, I'm getting this now. This is working for me. I'm not hesitating. I can talk about this all day long.
Excellent. So today we introduced what thought leadership is. The first question that people need to ask is, can I be a thought leader? The answer is yes. What are the ways that we can build it, evaluate it, and then include others in this?
And be authentic along the way.
Authenticity is important.
Very important. Leave the ego aside. Bring out your authentic self. People will love it.
And know that it's an evolution.
Yes, always ongoing.
Always going. Thanks for joining us today. As you all know, that nonprofit leadership can be lonely and everybody needs a sidekick.
Thanks for joining us today. If you need more information or would like to work with us, check out our website at nonprofitsidekick.com.